I think the pandemic's left its mark on a lot of things, and I think Greek life was impacted.
Like over the next 3 or 4 years, I think Greek community, especially fraternities, are not really going to be existing in this campus anymore.
I think people during times of crisis try and find a scapegoat. For Greek life to be villainized wasn't shocking.
For the pandemic, it was very much so, much more closely together. Everything was in person. Everything had a lot more personal touch to it compared to what it was during COVID. That's at least how I feel about it, and what I've noticed within my fraternity personally, and somewhat seen within other Greek communities as well.
Recruiting is a big thing for Greek life. For it to be able to be stable without the development of good recruitment, like we were unable to have because of COVID, we just lost numbers. I think we took a 35% hit for the fraternities.
I was back home. I was still in community college when this decision first came about. I got a message from this guy over here, and he introduced me to the concept of Greek life, and he said, "Hey, you ever have any interest in joining a fraternity?" And I asked him, I was like, during all this COVID pandemic.
And Virginia's universities are also watching the new variant and its potential impact. As COVID-19 cases continue to spike across the state, college students could be returning to school next semester facing new restrictions.
I think the first thing we noticed is the involvement on campus. Because of COVID and the way social distancing worked, we weren't able to get as involved as we wanted to doing things in person.
And I never really understood the value of joining it until he sat down and had a conversation with me. And even throughout COVID's progressment before I came to Longwood, I think what made me feel comfortable, honestly, was how honestly well the campus was holding restrictions. We were one of, if not the only campus, to my knowledge, that didn't send everyone home again in the first semester of being back on campus, and just because of all the tight restrictions that we had. And I feel like with how tight the campus was holding these restrictions, and by extension, Greek life as a whole, all fraternities and IFC were upholding these restrictions, it's what made me feel safe to rush.
I think before the pandemic, people were very inclined to work with other organizations and try to build something together. But the problem was when the pandemic started, it became very difficult to recruit. So as a result, what started happening was you have individual fraternities, for example, who basically just kept recruited and kept that numbers by themselves. So let's say if it was to do a IFC recruitment event, you barely even see anybody show up. And not even just that, just getting the Greek community or the fraternity to show up was one of the biggest problems I think the pandemic caused. Because previously, before that, people were very susceptible to show up to events and come and just to show up, and which basically help each organization, because it kind of shows us that we are more than we do.
We love being together in person rather than through Zoom. So I think the biggest challenge we had to overcome is figuring out how we can still have that bond, that connection.
At Syracuse, tempers flared as students swarmed outside frat houses, denouncing what they called fraternity rape culture. At the University of Kansas, demonstrators chanted and waved signs outside Phi Kappa Psi, following an allegation that a student was drugged and sexually assaulted inside the frat house. No means no. And last month at the University of Nebraska, multiple rallies took place outside this fraternity after a young woman reported she had been raped. Now there are calls to abolish Greek life altogether, but our expert says it's not that simple.
With the abolish Greek life movement, I feel like people have a lot of right in like not believing in the value of Greek life.
I see the justifications of the movement, but I also think that you can't judge a whole batch of apples by one. It was hard navigating COVID for everyone, and I think Greek life was certainly one of the main targets just because of the activities that went on and things that happened.
I think the people's perception about Greek life has, changed over time, and that has caused some type of conflict because these days the problem is Greek life as a whole don't really have a good history when it comes to the way that we've acted previously and the way that we're acting currently.
The news mainly has been focusing on the bad eggs of the Greek community, and I feel like that's what people now perceive as that's just what all Greek life is, unfortunately, but in reality it isn't.
People have a lot of right in like not believing in the value of Greek life, but I also feel like there's a lot of value in like the close-knit brotherhood, in the service opportunities, the leadership growth opportunities that a lot of people end up overlooking for the sake of looking at the small section of Greek life that has kind of tainted the whole.
Especially being the IFC president, like I catch flack a lot just because, I'm a name to be named. So to abolish it as a whole is to count people out and then justify them.
I didn't really start understanding IFC, how they helped until COVID actually truly started, but I have noted through my time within Gamma Side throughout the pandemic that IFC has helped and will continue to attempt to help to the best of its ability.
I think now that COVID is dying down, the big thing, like I said, is being on campus. Like once we get fully on campus again like we are now, moving everything to less virtual meetings and meeting people face to face, it's so much easier to get to know people, to connect, to socialize, to do all the things that are meaningful to us as humans. So I think that's the biggest thing for us, is just being back to face-to-face person.
I feel like throughout the course of the pandemic, from what I have seen as a person who has rushed Greek life during COVID, I never got to see what support from, IFC or Longwood was like pre-COVID.
I think the biggest thing was in-person recruitment is the most important thing. You have to be able to get to know someone on a deeper level than just on a Zoom meeting.
I don't think the school support Greek life as much as they should. In order to get Greek life to be where it's supposed to be, it can't just be Greek life, it can't just be the Greek community supporting themselves. You need some type of support from the school. One of the things that I learned was I basically found another home, basically because, I come from a different background, and when I came here, it was really hard for me to even find anybody or find friends. But there are some educational aspects of it, and there are some social benefits to it.
I think my biggest thing would be, do what you're comfortable with. I'm never going to be one to push someone into something they're uncomfortable with. They have to be comfortable with it, but also try something. If you don't like it and it's not your thing, don't worry about it. That's not a big deal. Greek life isn't for everyone, but it never hurts to try.
Innocence